Definitely the no echo is the better option.
All right. You're recording.
Okay, we'll call to order the April 1st meeting of the Olivos Community Services District Technical Subcommittee meeting at 8:35. Mr. Savage.
Director Parks. Here. Director Fair.
And item number 3 is public comment. So public may speak on that. Items not on the board. Do we have any public comments? Any online? No. Thank you. We'll move then to administrative items. The only thing we have on the administrative item is the minutes. Consent agenda. Any comment or clarifications? Any public comment on the administrative? Seeing none, could I have a motion?
I'll move that we accept the consent agenda.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes. We will move on to business items. Item number 5, discussion regarding the Wallace Group 30% design and life cycle cost draft. Let's see, Mr. Savage, maybe you introduce the item, take public comment, maybe let Kari add anything if she has, and then we'll have board questions.
Sure. So this is as noted in the document. This is the draft. So I hadn't reviewed it. Nobody had reviewed it from the district until I received it the other day. So we posted it as a draft so that this group and others could provide some input to the kind of the draft before we make the official 30%. So I've provided, like all of you, I went through the document in detail and I've provided a couple of comments to Wallace Group, Kari. Most of them are things like there's some typos and I'm missing a link or two here and there. We've had some questions about some numbers. Did find a number that was off by $100. But by and large, in my review, it looked fine. Kari kind of agreed to attend this morning. She wasn't expecting to provide any sort of presentation or walk through the document or anything like that. Instead, she's just here to provide us with an opportunity to answer questions we have or whatever. So that's why she's here. It's just a draft for the board's or the subcommittee's review.
Very good. Then for the board asks questions, we'll take public comments. Yes, Mr.
Hi, good morning. I didn't see in the draft, and I was hoping maybe that it'll be addressed here or maybe at a future meeting. Just wanted to bring it to your attention. There was an email from a Wallace Group employee that was copied in Mr. Fayram and Savage regarding the bridges. And there were some notes that I didn't see in the draft that I thought were very interesting that would be very costly if this was going to be an issue. And the comments were there's no room for a sewer pipeline on the bridge, and the load impacts of the sewer with the additional utilities and secured abutments will need to be investigated. And he recommended that a pedestrian crossing is really needed there. These bridges are narrow and have none to minimum shoulder for pedestrians, recommending the installation of a pedestrian facility to accommodate the sewer line. It seems like that would be a very big costly addition to the project, and I just wanted to make sure that this is addressed if it's not a big part of the draft or in the future. It's addressed maybe in a workshop. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll bring it to the committee. Well, first of all, are there any clarifications or anything new, Kari, that you wanted to add? I have some questions. I assume Mr. Parks does as well. Is there anything you wanted to add before we ask questions?
No, I'm just here to answer questions. As Guy mentioned, he's already provided some some comments on the report and had some questions on the tables, which I've clarified with him, and things that will, are duly noted, that will get updated in the final report. Really, I'm here to answer any questions, and then if there is something that was left out of the report that the district would like to have further justification or further exploration into information on that, whoever made the comment regarding the pedestrian bridge, I'll have to go back and look at the emails. If there by any chance a date on that email between us and the county, we can look for it, but I'll go back and verify that comment. But there's been lots of correspondence back and forth between the county and Wallace Group. So
So Sam, since we don't have video anyway, could we move the speaker closer to just make it easier for?
We can try.
To the extent your cord,
Let's see, we don't have video anyway. Kari, can you keep talking for a minute, just, read morning paper or something? This might be louder.
sure, I always love talking just randomly to black boxes on my screen. Can you guys hear me appropriately?
oh, okay. Perfect. That's much better. Right, thank you.
The issue.
All right, happy to open up for any questions you have.
Yeah, good morning, Kari, thanks for being here, and, this is all very new to me, so I may not have the most intelligent questions, but please bear with me. I mean, one of them is, so the next step of this is the sensitivity analysis, is that correct? And I heard that mentioned a couple of times in the report, and that's kind of like, seemed the next step, and it sounded as though the sensitivity analysis gives more clarification as far as questions we have for dewatering, questions we have for creek crossings and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so let's talk about the sensitivity analysis. It wasn't necessarily that there was something that was in our scope, but it's something that we can definitely provide, and we've got plenty of budget to do so. What we've noticed is that we've made some assumptions. Some of them fairly, easy assumptions that we can make some, relatively good assumptions based on the data that we have. Other assumptions are really truly that, in the fact that we're, for instance, what is the cost difference between attaching to the bridge versus, HDDing underneath the bridges? And what do those do to the costs? What is the sensitivity of a sewer system that is in the front yard of a private property versus the cost to the backyard? What is if we have to increase the depth by 10%, what is that impact on the construction costs? Some of the dewatering, we made some pretty, we did a lot of research on the dewatering, but what kind of impact does that really have on the project? And so we can go in and tweak some of the numbers. And when you adjust some of the numbers, some of them can have a large impact in the overall life cycle analysis, and some have absolutely no tweak whatsoever. There's very little impact. And what that sensitivity analysis can do is that you as a board and us as Wallace Group are going to, when this really truly gets, at the public workshop and stuff, just based on our experience working in Los Osos and everything else, is that you're going to get property owners who are going to get hypersensitive to certain aspects of the project. And if we have a better explanation or a better ability to say, yes, you may not necessarily agree with our assumption, but our assumption is based on an average and what we know now. And if we were to go onto this side of the assumption or go to this side of the assumption, it is going to have this kind of impact to the overall project. And it could either be a high impact or a low impact. And so that just makes it, okay, where do we really need to focus in on some of the, our costs, and making sure that our costs are in line and accurate versus, uh, you know, for instance, we reanalyzed the energy uses on the step system at the private properties, and that ultimately had very little movement on the overall life cycle analysis, just because the costs are so low. Um, so that is something that we can do before the public workshop, to just have a better method for us to advise the public on what really is going to drive cost impact to the project and what's not. Does that help?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for, just because it seemed to me that, yes, especially the dewatering and the creek crossings could have huge effects on cost, especially since we're putting lift stations down the south end of the district, if indeed we did. And that's where the dewatering problem seems like would be the greatest, because that's where the groundwater is the shallowest.
Yep.
Um, and also that would be where the gravity system is. I mean, the further south you go, the deeper you have to go.
Exactly.
And if you, yeah, depending on the depth that we're gonna have to be in the groundwater, that could be really significant as far as shoring up as through the construction process.
Yes.
That sounds correct.
Yeah, and there could be other options in terms of a sensitivity. For example, on the step system, we're not 100% sure yet whether or not we truly do need the equalization storage for solving. If we do not have to have any equalization storage, then the Santa Barbara lift station could go away. Um, if we have to have the equalization storage, then we've got to keep the Santa Barbara lift station. Obviously, that Santa Barbara lift station is ultimately then a large cost to the project and to the STEP project, which then, if it could ultimately result in, the cost for the STEP system being even better. But if the equalization costs are, if the equalization is required by solving, which is something that we haven't fully vetted, I think it's going to require another meeting with solving to have further discussions on impacts on their collection system and some of the nuances of the two different types of the systems, and to get their input before we can make that call.
Ben, I don't know if this is addressed, but the pipe size difference going from the district to Solvang, I mean, it's different gravity versus effluent. There's a different size pipe, and if that would affect whether the county, I have no idea the answer to this, but that would affect the county's proclivity to either accept or deny something like that. If there's a smaller pipe going across the creek crossing, is that more apt to get approval than a larger pipe that is carrying raw sewage versus effluent, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if those would be addressed as well, because I know that's a big deal as well, one underneath creek crossings versus going across the bridge.
I don't see because if we're comparing the pumped step system, which would be a 6-inch line, versus an 8-inch force main from the gravity system, that's not much difference in pipe diameters that's going to affect the decision that the county is going to make. For whether or not we can attach to the bridge versus not attached to the bridge. Now, what hasn't been determined is whether or not we can get away with a gravity system going down to Solvang, which would allow us to connect. And that, I believe, was a 10-inch or a 12-inch. Don't quote me on that one. I can't remember. There's too many numbers in my head. But for a gravity system, the pipe diameter would be larger. I think it's a 12, but again, I don't remember. And again, whether or not the county allows us to hang a pipe from the bridge or not, I don't think in the pipe diameters that we're talking about that they are really, one's going to be yes and one's going to be a no. It's either going to be a yes, you can hang your pipe, or a no, you cannot hang your pipe.
So it's not that for clarification, just so I don't misunderstand or being misunderstood. So the pipeline to Solvang is the same size, whether we have a step system or a gravity system, but for collection, the transmission line is the same.
So let yes.
Transmission was smaller with the step system, and I don't think that's the case.
No, it is a little small, right?
It is a little smaller, Tom. And again, and it may not be fully reflected in the plans yet. So for the step system, the main going from, we may have called it out as an 8-inch in that plan set, and that could be something that we could still potentially value out, is that because the step system does not have solids, we don't have the buildup that we're talking about, and it's under pressure. That would probably remain as a 6-inch line under pressure for the step system.
Okay, well, I'm glad I got that clarified.
Yeah, and again, I'm hoping I'm not misquoting the plans or the report. Now on the gravity alternative, we have made recommendations that the minimum pipe diameter be 8-inch through the collection system, and that is to have better ease of cleaning and maintenance and CCTV, future operations and maintenance issues. The sewer main, if we go with having to go with a pumped system, meaning we have to install the Santa Barbara lift station, and we go with a force main, I don't remember if we called out a 6 or an 8 for that, and I can pull up the plans if we need to. If we are able to hang the pipeline from the bridge and we can do a gravity, which we didn't give you the cost for the gravity system going down to Solvang, just because that wasn't really what you guys had asked for, but we actually did run those numbers, and the cost to construct the gravity sewer main down to Solvang versus constructing the Santa Barbara lift station and a force main were almost identical. And the life cycle wasn't, it was, they were all within what I would call a reasonable level of error. And not one of them like presented itself as the clear, distinct winner. So if we are capable of doing a gravity system, and this again goes back to, do we need equalization storage or do we not? Because if we don't need equalization storage, we can eliminate the Santa Barbara lift station, and if we can hang the pipeline from the bridge, we can do a gravity line all the way down to Solvang. That line is going to be larger. It's going to be, I think, a 10-inch is what we had called out, maybe a 12. It would be larger, but then you are eliminating a lift station, the Santa Barbara lift station. I don't know if it eliminates the Grand lift station, but it eliminates the Santa Barbara lift station, and now we, the just operations and maintenance and other, items get reduced. So I know we've presented a project to you, but there's still very much some nuances to the project that need to be understood and vetted, that can still make some, and can really, again, I think we can reduce the cost of the project in multiple ways for both systems, and it's going to be contingent on our discussions with Solvang.
Mr. Chairman?
And the county.
Two things.
And the county.
Yeah, real quick, a question and then just a comment. I asked Wallace Group to clarify some of these sizes and where they're used and that was one of my comments to them as well, because we're dealing with 2 potential collection systems and maybe as many as 2 different options for the conveyance. And so one of my requests to them was just kind of clarify that in some way so that we don't
Yeah.
get into this confusion. And then,
we can definitely do that.
By way of a question, you know, I've only been through this process with wastewater once, I've been through it with other things, but Kari, at this point, at a 30% design, is it fair to be that we would have this many questions still? I would think it is, but
Yes.
you know, by the time we get to 60, things are much tighter. So the fact that we've got these questions about what size and this and lift station or not, that's not new at this point at a 30% level. So I just wanted, that's what I thought, but I wanted to get you to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. The 30% is still lacking, you know, pothole information. It is still, the project still may be getting defined. Again, we don't have final responses from the county. You know, the county may not, and the city of Solvang may not even entertain providing responses until they see a preliminary design. So we kind of have to propose what we want and then showcase that to the county and to Solvang, and then let them comment. And if they comment and they reject the request, then we've got to backpedal and go to a different solution. You know, right now is looking at, and the purpose of this is really to kind of is to evaluate the project costs are, what the alternatives within that project look like, and how much impact they could have on the project. And so oftentimes at a 30%, we wouldn't even give like a direct number for the construction costs. We would give a range because there's still so many unknowns that we want to make sure that no one is set on it's this dollar value or this dollar value. It's going to be a, you know, 40 to 50 or 40 to 60 million dollar project because the contingencies they're just, there's too many unknowns still.
Well, and the Solvang equalization issue, I mean, that's almost also a negotiation point with that. To that, Kari, do you know, I'm trying to remember, I seem to recall the number was maybe 90 minutes. The travel time from Los Olivos to where we tie into Solvang?
No, I haven't calced what the travel time actually is. We can do that calculation, but we hadn't done it. And that was actually one of the comments that Eric had made was, hey, we know you guys had asked for equalization, but realizing that the travel time from Solvang or from Los Olivos to Solvang is going to be at an off-put of their peak hour, that truly require them to, you know, require the district to have equalization, or can we reduce the equalization, you know? And the other item that hasn't been really fully vetted is if we alter the point of connection to and bypass where the district had or where the city of Solvang had concerns in their collection system. We had talked to that with them when we met with them is tying in, and I think it might be where Santa Ynez ties in. Is that correct, Guy? Am I misunderstanding? Or
there's a couple of options that were thrown out. Yeah, there are a couple options that were thrown out there.
So we could look at extending the force main or the gravity system, but extending you know, a force main, once it's under pressure, you can take it anywhere, right? And the cost to install a force main, a small force main, a 6-inch or an 8-inch force main into the city streets at a shallow elevation is going to be far cheaper for the district than trying to tie in at the most upstream location and then having downstream impacts on the city of Solvang's entire collection system. So we may want to look at what that cost, you know, further investigate the impacts on the city of Solvang's collection system and where the actual best point of connection is that would eliminate the equalization storage. Now, that doesn't mean we want to eliminate emergency storage if we have lift stations. I do want to make sure that you guys are clear on that. We highly recommend that there is emergency storage at both lift stations if both lift stations are constructed. That is for lift station failure and just good operations. But it's the equalization storage that is going to be an operation nightmare for the district from an odor and operations perspective, and we really don't want to do that. But if we can negotiate with Solving and say, hey, we're going to extend our force main another 3/4 of a mile and connect in at this location, we're going to bypass your entire collection system and not have those impacts, then we don't want to do any diurnal or equalization and be able to send it directly to the solving plant.
Okay, then also in the document, you had noticed that the cost of the 30-year life cycle cost of the step and the gravity were close. Gravity was a little bit cheaper. In those assumptions, was that assuming the effluent tanks and all that were privately owned and installed?
So all of the private we did for the step system, we assumed all of costs for the step systems were put on the property owner on the private side. Those were not installed by the district. So that is included in the cost for the private property. But we do make a note that, and this was, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, because it's important that we understand that, because if there is a step system, the district hasn't, the board hasn't made a decision on if they would be privately owned and installed and owned, or district owned and installed. I think everybody knows quite clear my position. I'm not at all in favor of the district owning and installing these things on private property. So yeah. if we change that, then we need to include easement costs, potential litigation costs, and all sorts of factors that would even.
So that was one of the things that I noted to Guy that I don't think that we did not include in there was the easement cost. So what we've assumed is that private property would own it, or the private property owners would install their septic tanks or their step systems. However, that we've also assumed that the district would have an access easement over the step systems, and that you guys would have right of entry to the step systems. Now, we did not explore whether or not that meant that the district had full ownership of them, or just, hey, your step system needs maintenance, you guys need to do something for it, and you guys have authority over that, and that if you then have to do any work on it, that then you can back charge the private property owner. But one of the costs that we did leave out that I need to get included in the final, I failed to realize that as we submitted the draft, was the preparation of all of the easements on all of the private property owners, and that legal cost.
Yeah, because you've got the cost of the easement descriptions, you've got the cost of purchasing the easements. You can't require anyone to donate them, and I didn't see that in the cost list. And if we're going to have, well, we don't need to beat this. The board hasn't made a decision. We haven't made a decision on the collection system, and then if there's a step component or full step, we haven't decided if the district's going to have that involvement or not. And like I said, I think everybody knows where I stand on that. So we had talked at some point too that, depending if it's all gravity or partial gravity, partial step, that we could avoid 2 pump stations and go to 1. Could you just clarify that again? Where is there no way to have a single pump station with a full gravity system? I understand with the step, you can avoid a lot of that because you don't have the creeks are a problem, right?
Correct. So on the step system, we will definitely eliminate the grant lift station. we could possibly eliminate the Santa Barbara lift station. That would still need to be determined. And again, it goes back to coordination with City of Solvang. For the gravity system, it is contingent on whether or not we can hang a gravity line from the bridge. If we are capable of hanging a gravity line, the fortunate part is that the district is sloping from north to south and the direction that we're sending it. So we get deep, but we're not extremely deep. There is potential that we could. Do you want me to hold and wait for Tom to come back?
Please, yeah. He stepped out. He'll be back hopefully here in a minute.
No problem.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So Kari, like, if you're going
Hold on a second,
gravity.
Greg. Let's make sure that Tom can hear just as well. He's coming right back. He's got his dad. Okay.
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 Apologize.
I had her pause her answer so she could pick back up and you can hear the full thing.
I had a family member who was, I apologize.
No problem. On the gravity system, if we can hang from the bridge, there's potential that we can flow by gravity across the bridge and eliminate the lift stations. Again, both the Grand lift station and the Santa Barbara lift station. But that's again contingent on whether or not we can hang from the bridge. And then that would then result in a gravity line coming from Los Olivos all the way down to Solvang, which does increase construction costs because a gravity main is going to be more expensive going down to Solvang than a force main would be.
And so it seems to me then there's and as Mr. Savage said, we're at 30%, so we have these questions, right? There's a lot of questions still. And so the equalization and the bridge issue are some issues that we need to further develop. And I think I've mentioned in the past, I think I mentioned to you, Kari, that I've had discussions with the county now for well over a year about that issue, and I have not seen any indication that hanging a sewer on the bridge would be a problem. Again, that's preliminary as well. I mean, that's not a yes, but it's certainly not a no at this point. In fact, I was referenced, I think you were referenced to the bridge details that was it Vandenberg Village or somebody that had a bridge hanging over, I think it was the Florida Bridge, is that right?
Yeah, Wallace Group did the design for the sewer force main from over Floridale Bridge to Lompoc.
Okay, yeah, so there you go, there's another example of it. So there's no prohibition from,
correct.
Well, we have to look at it, but that's a piece of work that we have to do yet too. Just a couple other just cost related issues. And again, as Mr. Savage said, you said you have a range, but a couple of things I saw in there that you had potholing at 2.5 million. Is that again where you just want to be sure you're covered? Because that sounded like a high number.
Yeah, so that number is based on 1,000 potholes at $2,500 a piece. $2,500 is kind of a going rate. They can range anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000. We've estimated 1,000 potholes. That's going to be helping also to potentially pothole and locate septic systems if we need to. We did not identify and count all of the utility crossings. So we need to further refine that. But right now it's 1,000 potholes, and it's going to be the same for the step system and as well as the gravity system. We're crossing the same utilities, and we're going to need to pothole the same utilities. So that's not a number. The number may come down, but it's not going to change versus a gravity system versus a step system.
And I think Mr. Park said he's got a post hole digger that he's willing to help.
Yes.
That
I'll be on next week.
would help lower the.
Whatever, 2200.
And then, the last question I have, what were your, road repair assumptions? Was that full repaving of the road? Cause I think that's another, topic that we have talked about the county about how, ultimately, you know, they are gonna do pavement and road work throughout the community, and how can we optimize, if we repave all the road, then the district residents only pay for that. If we're able to do something where we don't do that everywhere because the county may be repaving or doing road work at some future point, then that's paid for like by the road fund of the county of Santa Barbara, like all the road repairs are. So I think that's so I heard your answer. You said you just assumed yes, that everything would be repaved.
No, so our assumptions are is that we've included the cost for the trenching and the laterals. It does not necessarily include full road restoration anywhere.
Okay, all right. It's the opposite. Thank you. And that's okay, good. And that could change. There could be some areas where that might not be the case.
And that is obviously, you know, the more road repair that either, you know, this project is going to have to endure and take on versus the county, that's going to drive some big costs escalation. And so that is something that, you know, will affect the overall project costs. But you're having to install either the sewer lateral or the sewer mains. We did assume on the force main going down the conveyance that we would do HDD, which would have limited road impacts as compared to inside the town.
Okay. Well,
Now, will next analysis have the difference of whether we would go ahead and connect down by the solvent treatment plant versus connecting at Sunnyfields? Because I know, like you were saying, that there is quite an upgrade cost to the infrastructure that Solvang owns that would be passed on to us, whether or not would we get some kind of cost comparison, whether we went all the way to the lift station close to the treatment plant?
We can look at the alternatives for that. Yes, it's not currently included.
Yeah, but when you talked about bypassing Sunnyfields, were you considering going all the way to the lift station or just further down their system?
We would want to look to see where the best point of connection is. If a point of connection is further upstream that doesn't have any impacts on the city's sewer collection system, then we would want to connect in there. But if the point of connection the best point of connection is at the wastewater treatment plant where we have the least amount of impact on the collection system that we wouldn't have to do any upgrades, then we would want to look at that.
If I could, Director Parks, ultimately, that's direction we give to the Wallace Group for the 60% design. Kind of like, how do you guys want to collect, right? That's direction we give to them, and they take that into what they do for 60%. And if it's new work, like examining these different locations, then they would tell us what the cost of that is for them to do that work.
Anything further? Yeah, Doug.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring up something that might be good for a clarifying goal. That is when we're looking at the preliminary design, whether 30% or 60%. What the key thing is at this point is having a high level of confidence in numbers that will not be exceeded when we present a number for an assessment vote. And so these questions that are coming up are natural questions that I think are awesome. And they're actually things we talked about, more or less getting to this point. Excuse me for that. But the we have on one hand a contingency that we place, and that really ought to be just a contingency on the cost of construction, not contingent upon what the ultimate design is. Because that's the difference between a sensitivity analysis and a contingency amount. So I think it's great that we're identifying these design elements that we see how sensitive things are and really kind of nail those. For example, I spent first 15 years of my career as a bridge engineer. And, there's not just two options of hanging a pipe on a bridge or drilling a bridge. We can build a pipe bridge that's adjacent to and not connected, or we can build a pipe bridge that's connected to. And that the bridge may assume lateral forces, but not vertical forces. And so there can be very cost-effective supplemental structural members that can be used as long as the right-of-way is there and the county is agreeable to suspend that bridge, that pipe adjacent to the bridge, without having to build a full pedestrian bridge, which could be many times more than what we need just for our pipe. But there's some other things, like a storage tank or metering of the flows and things like that. If we identify these things and focus on those to make sure that we get agreement so far as is possible from the county on things that could affect the sensitivity analysis, then we can rely on a rational contingency amount and very little risk. Then would be going forward with the assessment vote, which I think is kind of the main goal. So I just wanted to state those things as clarifying goals for what we move next. And Kari, I think you've been taking notes and identified the things that have been raised that are design issues, that the assumptions we just really don't know, but we've got to kind of nail those, or as close to nailing as possible, before we sit down and have this type of review again.
Well, and into that, I think would be really, I don't know if it's in your scope or something that you would be, we're going to do or would be willing to do, but the travel time to Solvang, I think, is really an important number for us to know, because that's always, when we talk about equalization, I mean, with the travel time, depending, we could potentially have a situation where we make it worse. To Solvang, depending on, I mean, if we delay their peak, our peak delays their peak because we're so far away, that if we then delay our peak that somehow aligns with their next peak, they would want that. So, and so then you're talking about an entire day, which maybe is what you would be doing anyway. But if we had that information, I think it'd be helpful, because I don't know if that's been really thought through on the equalization discussion about that. And I'd be curious then if there's a equalization need for some of the new projects that are being looked at, in Solvang and other places, because the impact's the same, in fact, even worse for them. So if there's any way we could get that, that would be great.
Yeah.
And would it bypass that problem if you went all the way to the treatment plant, like staying as that's? I mean, you're bypassing all their infrastructure, so is it, I mean, yes, the peak still gets to the treatment plant, but at least it's not getting to all of pipes going to the treatment.
Correct. My understanding is the reason for the equalization is because of impacts to the collection system, not because of the wastewater treatment plant. But Guy, you may have better understanding of that.
Thanks.
So one thing I want to make sure that we don't confuse, you're throwing around the term connect to the treatment plant. We would never go directly to the plant.
Correct.
We would go to a lift station that carries waste to the plant.
We're standing next to it.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
On this side of the river.
They don't connect to the
Correct.
plant.
No, I understand that.
I just want to be clear because it could be good for people, right? So, yes, to your point, and this was the conversation. It's one that if you listen to any of the public works meetings at the city, not far from the lift station, you've got San Ynez has their line coming in. The city of Solvang has more than one line going to that lift station. They've got electrical, they've got power, they've got telecommunications. It's a very congested corridor. And so trying to get another pipe in there might be tricky. We don't know. We haven't examined it. And that's one of the areas that they're actually concerned about, is their pipe big enough? So they're going to have to do something no matter what. They meaning city of Solvang. So yes, we could potentially go into that same congested corridor. We could thereby bypass their line that they're worried about, but they have to upgrade that line anyway. So it's just kind of,
It just seems like we're going through a lot of old, decrepit lines that Solvang has had for a long time, and they're asking us to really help upgrade this, like one fjord and all that stuff. It's like, God, they've been a problem forever. Now they're finding an opportunity. Oh, well, great, we get a couple million here, $1 million there. So, yeah.
that's all part of that negotiation. That's like number 5 or 6 on my priority list.
All right. Well, that's,
And the whole dewatering thing, just, I don't know enough about it, but it makes me nervous just because it seems like we have so much going to the south end of the district, and that's where all the water is. And it seems like, at least in your preliminary plan, it just seemed like that is something that can be very expensive and add, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40% on our projection, if it's as bad as we think it is.
So if I may, Mr. Chair. So dewatering, I think Kari and I are both sensitive to dewatering because of Los Osos. It was a big issue in Los Osos because you're very close to the ocean there, and it ended up being a very large cost for Los Osos. So it could be one of those once bitten twice shy kind of things, But clearly, to your point, with the water levels where they can be during the year on the south end of the district, dewatering, meaning taking water out of the trench and putting it somewhere else, is a process we should at least consider and try and figure out. Now, it's interesting because anybody, like if you go talk to Michael Penta, who lives right there, right? And when they put that system in, they didn't have, that house was just built like 3-5 years ago. They didn't have a big dewatering problem to put the tank in and so on. Could be a question of timing, could be a question of the time of year, could be a question of all sorts of things. So what the direction to Wallace Group was include costs for dewatering, because we know it could be an issue, but we could get in there and say it's not that big of an issue because of the time of year and we've had a drought or whatever. Now, what's the process? I think it's kind of described in the document. I think it's described well enough. You take the water out of the trench, you let it settle, and then via standard permit, you put it in the creek. It's already water that's underground, right? You're just moving from point A a couple hundred yards, right? And putting it back in the creek, and then it flows. So that's the process. It's not, you hear the term dewatering, and it sounds like this big, oh my gosh, what is this? It's not, it's an engineering process, but it's not some, don't overemphasize it's important, don't get me wrong, but it just don't overemphasize the impact.
When you're digging trenches and you have water coming into it, then you have to shore everything up more probably.
Correct.
Because just in my experience digging, that's, you all of a sudden you start getting into water, the sides want to come in, and you really got to shore things up and all the things that goes along with it. And the deeper you get, the more annoying.
Well, these trenches be short, eh?
Yeah, so they put extra shoring, if you read through the document, see if they've done that. And that was basically direction from us. Make sure you consider kind of worst case of these.
And I don't remember what the
Wallace Group didn't include anything.
Yeah, I don't remember the issue because it was a long time ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. Standard.
Yeah.
I was the design engineer on the storm drain across Grand down the lower end, and we had that same problem. I don't remember it being a problem. We've done projects with dewatering all over the place. Every time you do a storm drain, you have dewatering. Sewer line is much like a storm drain, carrying a bit of liquid. But Yeah, it's just something that needs to be understood. Okay, let's see, we're gonna move on to item number 6, which is general discussion of collection, treatment, and disposal. This is kind of a catch-all that you have on there always, Mr. Savage?
Yeah, this is a standing item on the agenda. I left it in there in case there's something else. I don't have anything.
I guess, we pretty much covered all that. I will offer, public comment on item number 6 if anybody wants. Seeing none.
Do you have anything from Mr. Hill about this, Tristan's, looking at alternative for smaller local? Have we heard anything from him? Okay. I'll reach out to him as well. And then, that's the question.
Okay, and then, last item will be information out of the subcommittee member comments. And report on any meetings or, any comments of the subcommittee activities.
So I want to say thanks, Kari, for being here, because it really helps a lot to have you help clarify.
My pleasure.
Well, Mr. Savage, any? Okay, then I'll take a motion for adjournment at 9:26.
Make a motion to adjourn at 1:26.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Adjourn. Thank you, Kari. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you all. Bye.